Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, I'm Suyash and this is the second video in my playlist Base64, the must-know use cases. In this series, we are exploring how Base64 quietly powers a ton of real-world software workflows. In today's video, we are kicking off with the first use case, embedding raw binary files in JSON format. This one's super relevant if you ever tried to send images, PDFs or other binary data through APIs or web services that only accept text. We'll break down why this matters, how Base64 solves the problem, and I'll show you exactly how it works with a hands-on demo. So let's dive in and see how Base64 makes binary to text conversion seamless and API friendly. So we will first set up our project real quick. So we'll head over to Spring Initializr and I will select language Java, project type as Maven, Spring Boot version, whichever you like, and then I'm going to name it as Base64 use cases. And then I will select some dependencies here. First I'll take web and then WebFlux, which comes as Spring Reactive Web. And let's also add bean validation. That will be it for now. You can add more if you like. And I'm going to click on generate and then I'm going to extract this .zip file and I will open it using IntelliJ IDEA. You can use any other IDE that you like. That's totally up to you. After this, it will take some time to load all the files and dependencies in IntelliJ. Now let me actually explain why we have added Spring Reactive Web as a dependency. For this use case, we will be creating an API wrapper. What is a wrapper API, or more conventionally speaking, what is an API wrapper? Before actually discussing that, let's check out how an API works. So an API basically works like a middleman between the end user and the data or resource that the user wants. Now this resource is usually stored on some database, and in the process of this data retrieval, the API also runs some business logic. It can be user authentication, sorting or filtering the data as per the user's requirements, etc. So now when we talk about a wrapper API, it is just another API that doesn't own the original functionality. Instead, it calls the original API behind the scenes. The job of a wrapper API can be to translate, simplify or reformat the request and or the response so that the user doesn't have to deal with the complexities. So a wrapper API is like a middleman between the user and the real API. So creating an API wrapper would require us to create an API endpoint that internally calls another endpoint or an HTTP request basically. So to make that HTTP call, we are going to use something called WebClient. You might have heard of RestTemplate, which was the go-to for making HTTP requests in Spring for a long time. But WebClient is modern, it's reactive alternate. So when we talk about WebClient and RestTemplate, the difference or the comparison about both the things. So the basic key difference is that RestTemplate is blocking in nature. So it actually waits for the response from an API call before moving on. WebClient on the other hand is non-blocking and asynchronous in nature. That means it can handle more requests efficiently, especially under high load or when dealing with slow external APIs. So by using WebClient, we are making our wrapper more scalable and future-proof. Plus, it plays nicely with Spring WebFlux. Now let's add some properties in our application.properties file. I will mainly add properties for logging. So logging level root equal to info and logging level org.spring framework web equal to info. I'd also like to add logs from our web client. So I will write this property here. And since encoding a binary file to text using Base64 encoding increases the size of a string by 33%. So let's increase the maximum amount of data that can be buffered in memory when processing HTTP requests or responses. So I will add string HTTP codecs max in memory size and I will set it to 50 MB for now. Then I will add the base URL for our wrapper API I would also like to include our API request details in the logs. So I will add Spring WebFlux log request details as true. Then I will create and add one sample PDF in the project folder. I'll just open a Word file and save it as PDF. And let's actually try it saving with minimum size. So this is done. Let us move back to our IDE and create a package called usecase1 inside both the services and controller packages. Then let's create a controller class called PDF to Base64 converter, and let's annotate it with @REST controller and request mapping. And inside this I will add the dependency for PDF to Base64 converter service. Now remember that this service doesn't actually exist as of now, so we are going to create it afterwards. Let us create an endpoint first, and we will call it as get PDF as Base64 with a map of string type key value pairs, and this will throw IO exception. Now let's create the service layer. I will add the @service annotation to it as well, and inside the class I will declare PDF path first. Then I will add a method convert to Base64, and it will throw an IO exception as well. Inside this method I will initialize a byte array, and it will read all bytes from PDF path, and then we will just return the encoded string. Then I will create another method to convert Base64 string back to PDF, and it will accept the encoded Base64 data as parameter, and then just return the decoded string. Let's move toward the controller again and resolve this import errors that are occurring over here. Then inside the endpoint I will initialize a string called Base64 PDF and call the convert to Base64 method using the service object, and then I will initialize a map object since the return type will be a map as well, and I will initialize it as a hash map and call the object as the response, and we'll use the method put to form the key value pair here, and for Base64 key the value we will pass as the Base64 PDF. So far what we have written is code that basically returns the Base64 string inside a JSON structure. So let's add a comment here, and let's also annotate this method with @get mapping since it is going to be a get request. Then let's create another controller class called Base64 to PDF converter. I will again annotate it with @REST controller and @request mapping annotation, and since this will be where the wrapper API code will be. So let's add a small comment to indicate that, and then inside I will add the dependency for WebClient and the service class, and we are going to generate a constructor which will inject these dependencies. I'm getting an error here. So the reason I'm getting the error here is because this is not the correct way of injecting dependency for WebClient. You will need to create WebClient bean in an @configuration class, or other way we can inject it using auto-configured WebClient.builder method. So I will change this constructor a bit. I'm going to write WebClient.builder.base URL here, and I will specify the base URL of the API that we are going to call, and then build. Now we will add the endpoint for wrapper API to convert base64 string to original PDF. So let's create a method with the return type as byte array, and we will call it as get decoded PDF. And inside this method I will write mono map response mono equal to webclient.get. This basically initializes a reactive container, and this will return a map since the return type we have declared as map, and initiate an HTTP GET request. Then I'm going to write .uri to set the target, and then .retrieve. So this retrieve method executes the request and prepares to handle the response. And finally I'm going to write body to mono, and this method basically will convert the response body to a mono of type map. I will then decode the string back to original PDF by creating a byte array again and calling the convert base64 to PDF method of the service class, and I will return the byte array. Since we intend to directly return the PDF in response, I will set the content type media type dot application underscore PDF and header as http headers dot content disposition, and I will add the default name of the file as decoded.pdf, and in the response body I will send the byte array that I declared earlier. Let's add the @get mapping annotation on this method, and I see one error here. Oh, I think this should be lowercase. Since we want to call the get method, we need to use the object. We are using the class right now. So this is all done. Let's test our endpoint in the Postman. First, let's create one workspace for this project. So I'm going to create base64 use cases, and then afterwards I'm going to create one blank collection inside, and I will name it as Base64 use cases. Let's use the same name, and inside there I will add one folder and call it use case number 1. And inside this folder, let's add a request, and to take the URL correctly, let's do one thing: move to IntelliJ IDEA, and the controller method that has the get mapping on it, let's go to the down arrow and generate the request using IntelliJ, and let's copy it and just paste it in request section, and let us call it as PDF to Base64, and let us click on send. As you can see, we have gotten a Base64 string, and it's in the JSON format as we wanted. So let's check out the other endpoint that we had that we want to test now. So again, likewise, we will generate the request in HTTP client and copy this request, and I will add another request inside this folder, and I will paste the URL for this, and we can also name it as Base64 to PDF, as in this is the reverse of the previous operation. So let's save it and then click on send. So as you can see, there is one preview of the PDF, of the original PDF that we started with. Alright, so that wraps up our first use case in a series of 8. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out the next 7 use cases coming up in the playlist. If you have any questions or you have any feedback, or if you'd like to share any creative ways in which you have used Base64 encoding, I would love to hear from you. So drop it down in the comment section, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.